And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome to an avant-garde original production of What's a Scene? In order to understand the concept of what a scene is in terms of fiction writing, it is important to have an understanding and a mastery of time. I know you might be thinking to yourself, bitch, I've been to plenty of plays, and I know what a scene is. I didn't have to know anything about time. And I would respond, but you do have to understand time in order to understand scene. So, let's allow us to call on our guest helper tonight, Father Time, who can slow things down, speed things up, and teach us everything we need to know about what a scene is.
Who am I? Well, I'm Father Time. What do I do, you ask? Oh, I do what all fathers do. I take care of things. The time mostly. All the time in the universe. I keep everything in tip-top, tick-tock shape. Slowpoke. But most of...
Now that we understand time, we can move on. We're writers, and each time we begin the writing process, we are actively making choices. One of the most important choices we make is how to tell our story. And in order to convey stories, each writer has to first decide whether they are going to show information or they are going to tell information. You heard this from a million English professors, and it is vitally important to understand the difference between showing and telling when we are in the business of making scenes. Now, let's pause for a second, and let's merge the ideas of time and writing. Stories are governed by their own time. This is what we'll call story time. It's the amount of time covered by a story. We also have something called discourse time. Each of the words that the woman is furiously typing out on the screen add together to build the discourse. When the story time is equal to the discourse time, it means that the events on the page take the same amount of time to read as they would take to occur in real life. And when that happens, boom, we have a scene. And when we have a scene, we are showing something rather than telling, because the scene is basically happening before our eyes. When this occurs, we feel like we are directly engaged in the story because it's being shown to us in what feels like real time. It feels immediate. To illustrate what a scene is, please watch the following short film created by my friends male model number 1 and female model number 1. It was the end of a long Sunday, and Fernando and Roberta took their usual places in the sitting room. "I want to listen to my Jane Fonda workout tape to help me relax," Roberta said. Fernando hadn't even had time to open his Andy Warhol colouring book. "I want to relax, lovey," Fernando said. "Me too," Roberta said. "But you know that I can't read with noise," Fernando said, and he pointed at the Jane Fonda workout tape. "Fernando, it's a fecking colouring book," Roberta said. That, my friends, was a scene. Look at it this way. The amount of time that Fernando and Roberta spoke in the story, what we can refer to as story time, would take real time to transpire in the real world. In other words, the story time is equal to discourse time. But this isn't always the case. Sometimes story time can be greater than the discourse time. What does that mean? It means that some events would take longer to actually transpire in the world than the writer has devoted to the telling. This is what we refer to as summary. By summarizing, an author takes time and compresses it. Let's go back to Roberta and Fernando for a little guidance. All evening long, Unable to concentrate on his Andy Warhol coloring book, Fernando took angry sips from his glass of red wine, while Roberta repeated all of Jane Fonda's words. Here we have a perfect example of how the story time was greater than the discourse time. The amount of time that passed, which was clearly enough time for Fernando to drink his entire glass of red wine, and to be angry, and for Roberta to listen to her audio cassette of Jane Fonda's workout tape, would take longer than the actual discourse time of the narrator telling the story. That's summary. Story time being greater than discourse time. Oh, there you guys are. I've been trying to navigate my way inside this television, and I have had the most difficult time imaginable. Televisions are crazy. Don't take walks inside of them. But luckily, I wound up right here in Roberta and Fernando's living room. Now, you should have a thorough understanding of scene and summary by now, and I just wanted to clarify a few points. Number one, it's imperative that you know that both scene and summary, when used properly in a story, will move the story forward. Why is that? Because they both involve time. Time progresses. Time moves forward. Now, if you are asking yourself, why would I ever do anything in summary? Isn't summary just telling, and aren't I supposed to be showing? Okay, calm down. Take a deep breath. So let's go over here to Fernando and Roberta's living room. So I think it's interesting to note that there will be times that you will want to do things in summary rather than doing it in scene. Let's take, for example, that last summary that I just provided as an example. We know that Fernando's taking sips of his wine, and he's been doing it all evening until it's gone. And we also know that Roberta has been listening to her tape. I don't really think as a writer, if I were writing that scene, that I would want to break each of those moments down blow by blow so that their story time was equal to their discourse time. I would rather move the plot along. I'd rather move the story forward. We are so close to having a thorough understanding of scene and summary that before we conclude, I want to talk about two ways that you can construct a scene. These involve infolding and unfolding. Not to be confused with this hijacking that has gone on my screen with Martha Stewart and these fitted sheets. It's not that type of folding. It's a different type. Now, let's return back to Fernando and Roberta's living room. Hey guys, I'm back! Anyway, I want to talk to you for a few minutes about unfolding. Unfolding is one of the methods for creating a scene. Now, in order to illustrate this principle, I brought along some new technology. Paper, because paper can be folded. Unfolders are people who allow, they're writers, who allow the moments of their story to unfold beat by beat, so that each moment that's happening in the story, in story time, is given equal weight in discourse time. This makes the reader feel like they're right there. So here we are, in the living room of Fernando and Roberta. We're right there, and I've got this unfolding guide. So let's go over what it would feel like if we were immediately there, beat by beat. Fernando takes a sip of his wine. Roberta mouths the words to her Jane Fonda tape. As she does that, she stops and rewinds, listening to the same part over. Fernando sighs at this, and he leans back in his chair, his Andy Warhol coloring book still closed. Roberta speaks. She asks Andy, "What's wrong?" Fernando remains silent. Each of those moments in the scene are a beat in time. Those moments, when unfolded, allow the reader to go along beat by beat and moment by moment, because right there, story time is directly equal to discourse time. That is what an unfolder is. You might be thinking that unfolding is a very limited way of showing a scene. It is, and it isn't. Everything has its limitations. But here's the point. Every time you construct a scene, you should make intentional choices. Once you make those choices, they will inform the story that you are writing. So if you decide that you are going to unfold, what could be your specific purposes? Think here to our example about Fernando and Roberta. If we unfold and we build detail by detail about the fact that we know that he wants to read and she wants to listen, that this is creating tension, and each line of dialogue and each movement that exists between the two of them in the scene in real time adds to that tension. We also know that we could use a very similar pattern of speech repeatedly. That could create rhythm. The rhythm could add to the tension. Now we move on to infolding. Some people, like unfolders, believe there's no time like the present, and you go through beat by beat. But infolders are built a little bit differently. Now we're going to see how you would infold a scene. In an infolded scene, time is slower. Why? Because the story time is actually less than the discourse time. So let's take, for example, our good friends Fernando and Roberta sitting in the living room. We don't know very much at all about the interior lives of either Fernando or Roberta because the story time is equal to the discourse time. But what if the story time is less than the discourse time? Meaning that we take more time as authors to talk about what is going on in the interior lives of our characters rather than the blow by blow, the beat by beat, the moment by moment. So let's take an example. Let's say that the very first moment that we're going to have is that Roberta peers across at Fernando and she notices that he is wearing her shirt again. For years, her clothes have gone missing, and now for the first time in their lives together, she's beginning to wonder, has he been taking her clothes? Wearing them? What does this mean about their relationship? How has she not noticed until just this night, as she sits here listening to her Jane Fonda workout tape? Why has everything that she's loved so much gone missing? The thoughts of Roberta's missing clothes lead her to think about her missing cat, Tippy. Tippy was her favorite cat, and now that she's thinking about missing things like Tippy the cat, she's also beginning to remember the night that Tippy ran away, the night that she went missing. And as she ruminated on this night, Roberta remembered that this was the particular evening that she first suspected that Fernando was cheating on her because he smelled of a strange perfume, and this all made her think about her cat. And then Fernando clinks his wine glass, and we're back in story time. Instantly, she's taken out of that moment, and we go back to beat by beat. Here, we clearly see that very little story time has actually been covered. What has mainly been covered has been discourse time, interiority. This enriches the story in a different way than we see in unfolding or even in summary. Now that you have a thorough understanding of scene and summary, you know how to move a story forward. What is imperative is that you remember that each time you sit down at your computer or notepad, you are your own father, mother, or gender nonconforming time, that you make the decisions about how your information will be conveyed in your story. Ultimately, every choice you make when you are constructing a scene or summary will move your story forward. Thank you.
Now we're old and gray, Fernando. Since many years I haven't seen a rifle in your hand. Can you hear the drums, Fernando? Do you still recall the fateful night we crossed the Rio Grande? I can see it in your eyes, how proud you were to fight for freedom in this land. There was